Welcome to the deep dive. We're jumping straight into 2 Kings chapter 7 today.
Right.
And let me tell you, it's quite the story. A real shift from, well, total despair to something completely different.
Right. So set the scene for us. Where are we?
We're in Samaria. The city's under siege by the Arameans, and it's bad. I mean, really, really awful. We're talking famine, like starvation level famine inside the city walls. It's incredibly grim.
It is grim. And that context is, well, it's everything here. Samaria is totally cut off. The Arameans have them boxed in.
Yeah.
Food isn't just scarce, it's practically non-existent. Prices for, anything remotely edible are sky high. People are just trying to survive day by day, hour by hour even.
Just brutal. And right into that situation, that sort of suffocating reality, steps the prophet Elisha, and he brings something, well, completely unexpected. A prophecy that sounds, frankly, impossible.
Utterly impossible given the circumstances. He stands up and declares very specifically, he says, about this time tomorrow, things will be completely flipped. Tomorrow, food will be cheap. Not just available, but cheap. Right there at the gate of Samaria.
And he gives actual prices, doesn't he?
He does. Specifics. A seah of fine flour for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley for a shekel.
Okay, unpack that. What does that actually mean? Shekel.
Right, so a seah is a measure of volume, maybe 7 or 8 liters-ish. And a shekel is weight, used like money, about 10, 11 grams of silver.
So even normally, that might be a bit pricey for that much flour or barley.
Maybe a fair price in normal times, but certainly not cheap. But in this famine, getting that much food for any price would be a miracle.
Right.
So saying it'll be that cheap the very next day.
Yeah.
It's beyond belief for people starving inside that city. It's this promise of instant, massive abundance right against the backdrop of, absolute lack.
It's so out there that someone right there, someone important, just can't accept it.
Exactly. The king's officer, the one the text says was leaning on the king's arm, so probably a close advisor, maybe his right-hand man, he hears Elisha and just dismisses it. Instantly.
And he says something pretty strong, right? I think the text quotes him.
It does. He basically scoffs, look, even if the Lord should open the floodgates of the heavens, could this happen?
Wow. So he's saying, even if God did some massive cosmic miracle, this specific thing, still couldn't happen.
That's the level of his doubt. Yeah, it shows just how impossible the situation felt, even to those in charge.
And Elisha's response is fascinating. It's aimed right at him.
It is. It's not just a general, have faith, it's personal.
Yeah.
Elisha says, essentially, oh, it's going to happen all right. But then he adds this kicker for the officer. You will see it with your own eyes.
Okay.
But you will not eat any of it.
Oof, that's heavy.
It really is. He'll witness the miracle, the abundance, the salvation of the city, but he won't get to benefit. He won't partake. It sets up this really dramatic personal outcome for him later in the story.
And it definitely underlines that theme, about the consequences of just flat out refusing to believe God's word when it's spoken clearly.
Precisely. Okay, so while all this is happening in the palace, the prophecy, the doubt.
Yeah, let's shift focus because the story takes us somewhere unexpected, outside the city gates.
Right, to 4 men.
Yeah.
And they're in about the most desperate state you can imagine.
These are the men with leprosy, outcasts, forced to live outside the city.
Because of their condition.
Yeah.
And now they're facing the same famine as everyone inside, but they don't even have the basic shelter or community of the city. They're completely isolated.
And they have this moment of realization, right? They talk amongst themselves.
They do. Their situation forces them to face facts. They spell it out. If we go into the city, we'll die of starvation eventually.
Yeah.
If we just sit here outside the gate, well, we'll die of starvation too.
So either way.
Either way looks like certain death. They're caught between a rock and a hard place, quite literally. Which, it makes you think when you feel like all the normal options are just dead ends, what kind of radical thing might you try?
So what's their plan? It's pretty desperate.
It's a total long shot. A Hail Mary, like you said. The only thing they can think of that isn't certain death is to go over to the enemy camp.
So the Arameans, the ones besieging the city.
Yep. Go to their camp, surrender, and just hope they show some mercy.
That sounds incredibly risky.
It is, but their logic is stark. They say, if they spare us, we live. If they kill us, then we die.
Wow.
It's not about hope, really. It's just choosing the path that has even a tiny, tiny sliver of possibility, rather than the 2 paths that lead to definite death. It just shows how utterly desperate they were.
So they decide they're going to do it.
They act on it. As dusk is falling, fading light, maybe less chance of being seen clearly. They get up.
And head towards the Aramean camp.
Exactly. And this is where things take a sudden sharp turn. This is where the divine intervention really kicks in.
Okay.
They get to the edge of this huge Aramean camp,
Yeah.
expecting guards, soldiers, the whole enemy setup. And nothing. Silence. The entire camp is empty. Deserted. Not a man was there, the text says.
What? How? Why?
Well, here's the amazing part. The text tells us the Lord had done something. He'd caused the Aramean army to hear sounds that weren't real.
Wait, like phantom sounds? Auditory hallucinations for an entire army?
Pretty much. The Lord made them hear the sound of chariots and horses and a great army, a massive incoming force.
Okay.
And in their fear, they didn't check, they didn't scout, they just jumped to the most terrifying conclusion. The king of Israel hired help.
Like mercenaries.
Powerful ones. They thought he'd hired the Hittite and Egyptian kings to attack us. Imagine the terror. This wasn't just a noise. It was the sound of impending doom from two major regional powers. It's like divine psychological warfare.
Incredible. Not a single sword lifted by Israel, but God uses a sound.
A sound. And this huge Aramean army completely panics. They just break and run.
And the text emphasizes how fast and chaotic it was, right?
Absolutely. Got up and fled in the dusk.
Mm-hmm.
They abandoned everything. Tents, horses still tethered, donkeys, supplies. The camp left exactly as it was.
Wow.
They weren't retreating, they were routing. Just running for their lives, leaving behind all the spoils, all the food, everything.
What a turnaround. The besiegers become the panicked fugitives?
Instantaneous. And these four lepers are the very first people to stumble upon this scene, this massive, empty, fully stocked enemy camp.
So what do? I mean, after the initial shock...
Well, understandably, their first thought is survival. They've been starving. So they go into a tent and they just eat and drink. Imagine that relief.
Oh, yeah.
And then they see the stuff. Silver, gold, clothes. So they start gathering it up, hiding it. Basic survival, maybe a bit of opportunism kicking in.
And they do this more than once.
Yeah, the text says they went into another tent and did the same thing. Eat, drink, gather loot, hide it. They're acting like guys who just escaped death and found a sudden fortune. Looking out for number one initially.
But then something changes, doesn't it? They pause.
They do. After that initial sort of self-focused reaction, they stop. They talk to each other. And there's this moment of like profound realization. They look around at all this abundance and they think about the starving city just behind them. And they actually say it out loud. We're not doing right.
A conscience kicks in, even out there.
It really does. They immediately grasp the bigger picture. This is a day of good news, they say, and we are keeping it to ourselves.
That phrase, a day of good news, feels really significant.
It is. They recognize what they've found isn't just personal luck. It's salvation for everyone. And they even realize there could be consequences for hoarding it. If we wait until daylight, punishment will overtake us. Whether that's divine punishment or human, they feel this urgency.
So they make a choice.
A swift, ethical choice. Let's go at once and report this to the royal palace. The weight of carrying this good news, this potential salvation, pushes them to act for the community, even the community that cast them out.
Incredible. So these four men, outcast, expecting to die, they become the messengers of hope. They go back to the city gate.
Right, back to the gatekeepers. And they don't even ask to be let in at first. They just deliver the news. Hey, we went to the Aramean camp. It's empty.
What did they say they saw?
An empty camp. Eerily quiet. No sound of anyone, just tethered horses and donkeys, and the tents left just as they were.
And that news must have spread fast.
Like wildfire. The gatekeepers shouted the news, passed it along, and pretty soon it reaches the king himself, probably wakes him up in the middle of the night.
And the king's reaction is not exactly jumping for joy, is it?
No, not at all. He's immediately suspicious. Understandable, maybe, given how long they've suffered. He gets up and thinks, wait a minute. This sounds like a trap.
A trap? How?
He figures the Arameans know they're starving, so maybe they just pretended to leave. Maybe they've hidden themselves in the countryside, just waiting for the hungry Israelites to rush out for the abandoned camp.
And then they'll ambush them, capture them easily.
Exactly. His mind goes straight to the worst case, most cynical military possibility. It shows the psychological scars of the siege.
But one of his officers has a different idea, a way to check it out.
Yeah, someone suggests a more practical approach. Look, he says, let's send a few guys out to see. He's grimly realistic about it, too.
How so?
He points out they only have a few horses left anyway. The text mentioned just 5 remaining earlier. He says, basically, send some out. The fate of those scouts Well, it won't be any worse than the fate of all the rest of us doomed Israelites stuck in the city if we just sit here.
Wow, so it's like, what have we got to lose? Sending them out is a low-risk gamble in their desperate situation.
Pretty much. A way to verify without risking everyone.
And the king agrees.
He does. He sends out 2 chariots with their horses, tells the drivers, go and find out what has happened. Get eyes on the situation.
So the scouts head out. What do they find?
They find absolute confirmation of the lepers' report, and more. They follow the Arameans' escape route as far as the Jordan River.
Was it clean?
Far from it. The entire road was strewn with stuff. Clothing, equipment, everything the Arameans had desperately thrown away in their headlong flight to move faster.
So, clear evidence of a panic, not a planned withdrawal.
No doubt about it. It paints this picture of utter chaos and fear. They were dumping anything slowing them down.
The scouts see this, they return.
They report back to the king. This is real. They're gone.
And that's the trigger.
That's the trigger. The gates are thrown open, and the people went out and plundered the camp of the Arameans.
Just imagine that scene. Starving people pouring into an enemy camp suddenly filled with food and supplies.
Total chaos. But this time, chaos born of relief and desperation, turning into opportunity. And right here...
This is where the prophecy clicks into place, isn't it?
Perfectly. Because of all this stuff flooding back into the city from a camp, especially the food, the law of supply and demand takes over instantly. Suddenly there's abundance. And when the goods are sold or traded at the city gate, the price is exactly what Elisha foretold.
Let me guess.
A seah of flour sold for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley sold for a shekel.
As the Lord had said.
Wow. The impossible abundance arrived exactly on schedule, exactly at the price promised, delivered by this completely unexpected turn of events.
But wait, there's one loose end. The skeptical officer.
Ah, yes. The doubter from the beginning. What happened to him? Well, the king had actually put him in charge of the gate.
In charge of the gate, the very place where the prophecy was being fulfilled.
The irony is just brutal, isn't it? He's assigned to manage the flow of people, probably trying to maintain some order as the starving citizens rush out.
And what happens?
The crush of people is too much. The desperate, starving population rushing out towards the food and spoils in the camp. They just overwhelm the gateway.
Oh, no.
Yeah. The text says they trampled him in the gateway and he died.
Trampled by the very people experiencing the salvation he refused to believe in.
Exactly. And it fulfills perfectly and tragically that second part of Elisha's personal prophecy to him.
You will see it with your own eyes.
But you will not eat any of it. He saw it. He saw the gates open, saw the people rushing to the abundance, saw the deliverance happen right in front of him.
But he died right there, in the middle of it, before he could benefit.
His disbelief literally cost him everything, including his share in the city's salvation.
So that's the story, an incredible journey in 2 Kings 7. We went from utter desperation, a city literally starving to death, to a prophecy that sounded completely impossible. Then these unlikely heroes, the 4 lepers, pushed by their own desperation,
stumble onto this amazing secret.
Caused by a divine intervention, this sound that panicked an entire army into fleeing and leaving everything behind.
Then the king's suspicion, the scouts confirming the truth.
Leading to the plundering, the sudden abundance, and the prophecy being fulfilled down to the exact prices.
And the tragic end for the one man in authority who publicly doubted it could happen, both deliverance and judgment side by side.
It really makes you pause, doesn't it? It kind of forces you to ask, how do you respond when things look completely hopeless, when all the evidence seems stacked against a positive outcome?
Yeah, and how do you react to news or maybe a promise that sounds just too good to be true? Do you dismiss it like the officer, or do you allow for the possibility of something unexpected, maybe even miraculous?
And thinking about those lepers again, they were facing certain death, took this incredibly risky chance, and ended up being the ones to carry life-saving news to everyone else.
It's powerful.
What does that suggest to you about, I don't know, responsibility? When you discover something vital, something potentially life-changing for others who are in desperate need, what's the obligation then? Lots to think about. What really stands out to you from this deep dive into 2 Kings chapter 7?